Welcome to Next Step Advanced Sketching Techniques. Students, today we are going to sketch out a photorealistic scene of a town crier, maybe in the medieval times. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is draw the town crier. Now, town criers were the type of person to make announcements to the whole village at large. These could be good announcements. These could be there's a sale at the market on fish. There's danger coming. There's a enemy at the gates approaching. And town criers, now they didn't have hairspray invented back in the medieval times, but what they did have was oil and natural substances from tree sap and such. And so the town criers, as a matter of habit or style, would hairspray, or what we call hairspray, their hair into distinct compartmentalized packets above their head. So maybe little rows of hairs that were each kind of almost glued together, and these were really elaborate and really high. Town criers' ears had to be large, and so you were selected based on the size of your ears, and you also needed to have a really loud voice to be able to announce the news across the whole kingdom. This is where we want to be really careful with our details and our specifics. And a town crier is going to be, you can see their epiglottis because they're having to talk so loud. So this town crier is now, even town criers have chins, correct? Correct. And the garb, another word for fashion, was different in the olden days. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, this is going to be, and they had really frilly sleeves as a style. So basically, he's going to be holding up a bell that he's going to ring. Now, we can't draw sound. That's one of the key concepts that I really want to point out to my students, but we can draw action lines. So this is going to just kind of signal that the bell is ringing. So this town crier is in the middle of announcing some type of episode. And as we continue to draw, we'll make more sense of this. All right. So if that sleeve is frilly, we also suspect this one to be frilly. Remember, our thumbs are going to be on the inside, and they're going to be the smallest appendage. Very important to keep an eye on your scale at this point in the game, if you'll permit me to say that. And now, at this point in the game, all right, town criers also wore skirts back in the olden days, in the medieval times. People did not wear pants, or men did not wear pants. They wore skirts, really long skirts. So we can see that his skirt comes down to below the knees. All right, now we need some perspective. We need a horizon. So we're going to just go. Notice I'm not going across the frill, the sleeve frill. And that's because that would defy physics. We want to match physics. Now, we mentioned a market. So let's go ahead and draw maybe a market stand where they're selling some fish and maybe some fruits and vegetables, all sorts of delicious and nutritious items. Let me just scoot this over a little bit for you guys so we can keep an eye. There we go. Now we can see that a little bit better. All right. And then maybe we'll draw some fish in here. Now, interestingly, a town crier beyond having really large, prominent ears to be able to hear. Oh, and we'll draw a vendor here, maybe a lady selling her apples and fish, and maybe some candles here. And maybe she has one candle on display just to show how well it works. But town criers, in addition to having large noses, or pardon me, not noses, large ears, town criers also needed to have, to be really emotional, because they did indeed literally cry. They were one of the most emotional figures in medieval Europe. And one of the reasons is they had to be in tune to the emotions of their kingdom. So we'll jump back over to our town crier in just a minute. We can't add emotion. That's one of the things I like to teach my students, but we can add crying lines, and we can kind of mimic the sound of what that would be. All right, so here's our lady. And ladies had really elaborate, ornate bows in their hair during this time. Interestingly, they did not wear skirts. The men wore skirts. The ladies wore long trousers. So it's interesting how that's kind of flipped. And maybe this other hand is just getting ready to help somebody purchase something. And then so we can go right here, and maybe there's a knight, because see, knights, yeah, they're tough people, but guess what? They had to eat too. So who's to say that this knight, careful with your detail here, that this knight was not wanting to buy a fresh slice of fish for dinner. So and maybe for his wife, he wants to buy one of these candles. And knights are going to have this armor, which we can do with cross hatching. Make sure your hatches going one direction equal the number that you have running perpendicularly. All right, excellent. Now, just to give some perspective here, we're going to draw a sun, and we're going to draw its setting. So it's in the evening, it's near dusk. All right, there we go. All right, so let's go back to our town crier, and probably going to have maybe some bags under their eyes because they've been crying a lot. They're super emotional. And we're going to draw some tears. Because let's say they're announcing a sale at the market, they're going to be crying while they're announcing it, because that's just in their nature. That's why they were hired. They're in tune with the emotion of the kingdom. So they're sitting here crying. Of course, they didn't have socks back then, so we need to add some detail here, some arm hair, and some more arm hair here. And then maybe that he just started crying, so the tears haven't reached all the way to the ground. All right, let's continue. So they didn't have airplanes invented back then in the medieval times, but what we can do to add some perspective up here is we can draw a cloud. Clouds back then were a little bit different than they are today. They were a little puffier, and they were a little smaller. Storms, as we know them today, did not exist. Everything was a lot less chaotic in the olden times. Now, you might have a minor rain shower, but it probably wouldn't compete with this town crier. That's just the way it was, see? All right. Now, let's say that beyond this, our sun right here is a large mountain. And guess what? The town crier is getting ready to make an announcement because he has agents that are planted strategically on the mountain, this way, that way, maybe this is the wall of the castle right here. So castles just use regular red clay bricks like we see in our houses and homes today. It's the same thing. But maybe one of his agents sent him a message via a pigeon. A pigeon is a very smart aviator, which is also called a bird. So we're going to draw a photorealistic pigeon right now. And this pigeon has just released a lock on a note, or a scroll is what they called notes in the old days, a scroll. And we can't draw the passing of time, can we? But we can draw time passing lines and arrows. And so the scroll has ended up in our time, or in our crier, our town crier's hand. And what this pigeon saw, because we can't just assume that pigeons can't write, but we can assume that it's likely that there was an agent that was able to write this message and then give it to their friend the pigeon, who was right here, who flew from this mountain pass. And here we have some barbarians, and maybe the leader of the barbarian is at the top of the hill, and maybe he has an eye patch. See, the little details here are what separates the professionals from the novices. And he just blurted out a tune that said, "We're going to come attack you and take all of your market food, and I'm going to be the new king." So he's got a finger held up there. And then, of course, he's not going to be by himself. So since we're further back, we can kind of, it's not cheating, it's just you don't have to add as much detail as you go further back. And they're getting ready to storm come down the mountain and take over the king and the kingdom. All right, so let's add some more detail. Now, we don't really have a lot going on in this region, and to be realistic, we don't want to have a lot of blank spaces. So maybe we're going to draw, well, they had sheep, they had turkey, they had chickens, but let's draw a lamb, which is a grown-up sheep. Sheep is plural for shep. So if this were a grown-up lamb, it would be a shep. But since it's a baby shep, it's actually called a lamb. Lambs have really almost like clouds, like puffy skin, almost like cotton skin. And they almost have like rabbit feet. And you want to keep that puffiness consistent. And then they're going to have these really cute, kind of inside is pinkish faces. And their eyes also tend to be really red and bloodshot from being out on the range, because the shepherds are going to keep them working pretty much day in and day and night, I should say. All right, so there's a lamb. Maybe this lamb is just exploring the area. And then maybe they did have cats back then, so put on your thinking caps, because I've got a trivia question for you as we draw this photorealistic cat. What animal that we now see in the wild is related to the kitty cat? It's in the same grouping, to be scientific, that the domesticated cat is. All right, you have 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now keep in mind that a cat's going to have furry whiskers, but its hair is also going to kind of flare out on the sides. And it's going to kind of have a small mouth. And a lot of times it sticks its tongue out. And then it has a lot of whiskers. All right, so your seconds are over. To answer your question, the animal that is related to the domestic cat is the tiger. The tiger and the cat are very, very similar. One's just bigger than the other. Besides that, they're essentially the same thing. A long time ago, people domesticated a tiger, and over time, the tiger got smaller and smaller and smaller because there was no need to be that big. They were eating cat food. So even by this time, maybe his grandfather was a tiger, but he doesn't have to be that big to pounce on prey anymore. All right, so what we're going to do now, and this is really more complex, so this is more for my students that have attended more of my lectures. We're going to draw a road. And roads back then were essentially the same as roads today. We're going to have it curve. And so if they were essentially the same, they had these hazard rectangles. The hazard rectangles actually preceded Cleopatra's time. And these were here just to make sure that if you were on a cart or riding around, that you did not, that you stayed on your side of the road, because, you know, horse and buggies and chariots, they can travel really fast. And maybe we'll draw a little chariot in the background here. Make sure you get your spokes. The chariot's going to have a high back. and then it's going to be connected by a very long string, excuse me, to a horse. And horses have really long snouts. All right, so now's a good time to just stop and make sense of what we have so far. All right, so we have the town crier. The town criers were very emotional. That kept them in tune with the rest of the kingdom. This town crier is announcing a sale that this lady is having on her fish and her apples and her fruit. Well, this knight's super excited, so he's coming up to buy some, save a little money. Even knights want to save money. Oh, but alas, this bandit of barbarians is up at the top of the mountain, getting ready to storm and take over the kingdom. But wait, one of the town crier's secret agents was there stationed. Let the pigeon know and attached a message. The pigeon dropped it to the town crier, and so that now the town crier is getting ready to announce that the barbarians are coming. Unfortunately, this kingdom's kind of small. They only have one knight. They have a girl running the market and this eccentric town crier, which is pretty standard. So if we kind of extrapolate events into the future, I'm going to say that this kingdom was most likely taking over. All right, so let's go ahead and do our outlines. You have 5 seconds to grab your outline markers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to start with our central theme, which is going to be our town crier. And if you're just joining us late, town criers were really a fixture in medieval Europe and medieval America. Their job was to alert the rest of the citizens of like sales. They didn't have TV or radio. They'd say, it's 10 o'clock and there's a sale at the market on apples and sardine fish. And they also had to be really emotional, as we talked about, because they had to be in tune with the emotions of the kingdom. And a lot of times their eyes were bloodshot because they pretty much were very emotional people. So they had larger ears to be able to hear what's going on as well. All right, this town crier is holding up really a stereotypical bell. You can see that as the bell moves back and forth in the wind, it disrupts the air, and that is what causes the ringing sound. The bell moving back and forth in the air creates resistance. A little science for you today. I'm always interested in providing my students a little extra bang for their buck, as you'd say. All right. The style back then for town criers was the frilly sleeves. And our town crier is actually crying, which is to be expected, but they just started crying, we can infer, because the tears have not reached the ground yet. All right, we'll scoot up a little bit for you. And the men, including town criers back in this time, wore very long skirts. They wore skirts. And the women wore pants. Things have flipped nowadays, and women wore really big, elaborate velveteen bows. It's just part of the style. That's how it was. That's how things were back then. We have a lot of evidence, geological evidence to support. They have actually found fossils of bows that were trapped in amber, which kind of adds clues. They found town criers with their hair in the same position, still holding a bell. The tears, of course, we need to maintain physics in our drawings as well, but as you would expect with physics, the tears have dried up by the time they discovered these really interesting people in an interesting time to live, because you didn't have like the social media. Now we're just coloring in this the scroll that our town crier got. And the bandit of barbarians is getting ready to storm. They've announced they're coming. They don't want anybody to presuppose or misunderstand their intentions. They're declaring, you have about an hour before we can make it down the hill, and we're coming to take you over. And I'm going to be your king. And of course, clouds, as we said, were more puffy back then. Storms didn't really exist. You might have a light rain, but that would be the extent of it. The sun was bigger in the sky as it was closer to the Earth at this time. The Earth is slowly drifting away from the sun. And we will draw our hazard lines. And we have a baby sheep, also called a lamb. Plural for sheep is sheep. Maybe at the end of this semester, students, I'll give a little quiz, and those of you who are able to, say, get 80% right, win a free getaway vacation to spend the night at my house for a one-on-one art class. So if you'd be interested in that, please put a message in the comments. And guess what? I'll make it happen. All right, and we've got a chariot. And now it's time to grab your coloring markers. Now today I've chosen the color yellow. It's one of my favorite colors. You have 5 seconds to get your color. Yellow is probably my favorite color, and that's why I chose it today. And we can expect that a bell would be yellow. All right, we can expect that the sun is yellow, correct? Correct. What about this marketeer's bow? Sure, it could be yellow, and she probably wanted to match her shirt and her pants. Lambs are not yellow, for sure. But even hazard rectangles existed back then, and they, of course, were the same color yellow. Pigeons are not yellow. Clouds are not yellow. But some fish can be yellow, and then lemons are yellow. You see how we're doing that? And we can say that our town crier had a yellow shirt on just to kind of stand out from everybody else in case somebody needed to provide some news of some emergent events that were going on. All right, so I think we're done here, folks. So we have just sketched out a photorealistic sketching of a town crier, kind of scan through for you, who is making an announcement of a sale at the market. I think anybody would be hard-pressed to distinguish this from an actual high-definition or ultra-high-definition photograph. Well, as I always say, thank you for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.